Hey, let's take a look at if statements. So far, you've seen that computers will execute one statement after another, after another, after another in a sequence. If that's all we had, then we wouldn't be able to veer or vary the sequence of statements that are being executed. And that's the role of the if statement, among others. An if statement allows you to test whether a Boolean condition is true or false, and then veer in one way or another to execute different blocks of code depending upon the outcome of the evaluation of the Boolean expression. A Boolean expression is any expression that evaluates the true or false. Keep in mind that for integers, 0 is false and anything other than 0 is true. Let's take a look at some examples. The value 7, the literal 7, I should say, is true. The literal 0 is false. If you had two integer variables named a and b, and a were 9 and b were 11, then a equals b is false. Double equal signs is a test for equality. A single equal sign is an assignment. Now, there's going to be times in your future where you meant a double and you put in a single, and that's going to be a bug. Some compilers, many compilers today are smart enough to warn you about having done that. The not equal, that was a boo-boo. Everybody makes boo-boos. Don't beat yourself up. So not equals is expressed like that, and given those two values of a and b, a not equals b would evaluate to true. A less than or equal to b would evaluate to true because 9 is less than or equal to 11. And on the converse, a greater than b would evaluate to false. Here's something. It looks to me like maybe I have a bug that I was just talking about. Let's see. If flag equals true, what I meant was to test flag for equality to true. Instead, I wrote an assignment. See, I told you, you're going to make that mistake. We all make that mistake from time to time. Don't beat yourself up about it. Okay, so if flag is true, then this Boolean expression will evaluate to true. Flag by itself is true if the underlying Boolean is set to true. Not flag, assuming that flag was true. Not flag, the not, in this case, the bang is being interpreted as flipping the value of a Boolean expression. So if flag is true, then not flag is false. So finally, we get to the if statement. And the if statement comes in a number of varieties. The first that we'll look at is in English, simply if this, then do that. So if a Boolean condition evaluates to true, do that. In picture form, if the Boolean expression evaluates to true, continue into the code block and execute the code block. What's a code block, you may be asking? If you remember, things that are surrounded, code that is surrounded by braces are code blocks. Okay. Now, if that Boolean expression evaluated to false, then you're skipping. But look, in both cases, you end up at the same point. The syntax is given over here on the right. If the Boolean expression, brace, code, 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 that's the code to execute if the Boolean condition is true, and then an end brace. Now it's technically true that the brace can be omitted. The braces can be omitted, but that is a recipe for tears, because in that case, when braces are omitted, then the single statement that comes next is the code block that's nested under that if. So if you're intending to execute 3, 4, 5, 9 statements, if the condition is true, you'll only get the one, and there's your bug. So a good habit to be in is to use braces all the time, even if the code block that you want to execute, if the condition is true, is only a single statement. Here's an example. If the number of people is greater than 1, then execute a single statement, but notice I put it in braces anyway. Print, please mask up. Okay. Now, another little bit of potentially new learning here is that notice there's no endl at the end of this, but there is this character pair of bash n. Bash n is a single character. It's the single character new line. Okay. Let's take a look at another variant of the if statement. That would be one that has an else clause. In English, it would be, if this, then do that. Otherwise, do something else. Now, an else clause on an if statement is optional. We saw that a moment ago, we didn't have the else clause, and that was perfectly fine. Recall back to that picture where if the Boolean condition was not evaluated to true, you simply skipped code. The difference with this picture is if the Boolean expression evaluates to false, there's a code block to execute. And after having done so, you come here. If the Boolean condition evaluated to true, there is a different code block to execute. And then you would link up at the same place. Notice, only one of these can execute. If the Boolean condition is true, you do the then portion. If the Boolean expression, notice I'm using condition expression interchangeably. If the Boolean expression is false, you do the false route, okay, the else route. In code, here are some examples. If the number of people, if num people greater than 1, as before, mask up, new line, else do an additional thing. So in the previous example, if the number of people was greater than 1, it would print, otherwise nothing. Now that we have an else, something's going to be executed because either the Boolean expression was true or it was false. Here's the version of the if statement that's fully formed. It will allow you to select one path through many choices. In English, it might be, if this one, do that one. Otherwise, if this two, do that two. Otherwise, if this 3, do that 3. And optionally, you can finish it with an else, which says, if none of the other cases are true, do this. And that's optional. Let's take a look at the picture. If this one, do that. Otherwise, so this decision number 1 was evaluated to false. And only if decision 1 evaluates to false will you ever get to testing decision 2. If decision 2 is true, do that code block. Otherwise, if it's false, and only if decision 2 is false, will you ever get to decision 3 and beyond, of course. So if decision number n is true, then do that code block. And with the optional else clause, If none of the other code blocks have been executed, then do this one. Now you can string together any number of these if-else clauses to cover any number of decisions you want to make, which are all mutually exclusive. As the code executes, only one of the code blocks will be executed. So here's an example. If the number of people is greater than 10, comment, run and hide. Maybe there's more code. Now, potentially new knowledge here is using // as a comment for a single line. We have seen that multi-line comments are introduced with /* and are terminated with */. That will allow you to do multiple lines in a comment. However, for a single line of comment, // introduces it. Anything after // is going to be ignored. So if num people greater than 10, run and hide, maybe do some more code. Else if the number of people is greater than 3, then mask up. Else if you're outside, let's call that a Boolean, then masks are optional. Otherwise, stay away from me if you're not masked. Okay? Now, there's something interesting here. Let's take a look at running through this code. So here I've got num people with different values and different values of the Boolean variable outside. So let's see if we can work this out. If the number of people were 20, so if num people greater than 10, yeah, that's true. So we're going to do this part. And I don't like that. Let's do this part. And we're done. The next line to be executed is down here. Okay, so the result is run and hide. Now let's take the case where num people is 5. So we come here and we say num people greater than 10? No, 5's not greater than 10. So else, if the num people is greater than 3, yeah, that's the one. So we're going to, we went from there to here. Okay, so after having executed that line, the next line to execute is here. And the result will be, first let me erase my marks there, and the result will be, please mask up. Okay, now notice I haven't even looked at outside. These dashes here, these are don't cares. I don't care what the value is because I never looked at it. Notice I haven't looked at them because I had already found a path through the ifs and the if-elses and the elses, okay? The ifs and the if-elses in this case. So now let's take the value of num people being 2. And we check here. If the num people is greater than 10, that's false. Else if num people greater than 3, that's false. Okay, else if. Now we check outside. So in this case, outside is true. This is the case that we're handling here. So we're going to execute that followed by going way down there. All right, so let me clean up and indicate what the result was. Mask optional. All right, now on the other hand, let's keep num people the same. It's still 2. And now make outside a value of false. So what's going to happen is num people greater than 10. You're kidding me, right? Because 2 is not greater than 10, false. Num people greater than 3, Nope, nope. 2 is not greater than 3. Else if outside. Outside is false. So finally, we land on the else because none of the other conditions evaluated to true. So we have not executed any of the code blocks. So we hit the else if it was given. Remember, else is optional. So we do this, and then the next statement to execute is there. And so the result, I don't need to erase because this is the last one. The result is stay away from me, which is always a good policy. Okay. Anything else? Nope. Now you know the if statement in C and C++. Awesome.